And welcome back to another episode of these crazy people that just eat me and can't stop talking about it. Jules, Neuro Diva Jules, has joined us once again for another exciting episode where we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff related to carnivore and semi-carnivore adjacent topics. So we thought we would talk about something that her and I have been kind of looking into lately, which is bioavailability. So, did you want to have something you wanted to say about that, or how the topic came up, or?
Yeah. I want to apologize for the sound. Just in case anyone hears this, I apologize. My kids are outside the door trying to bang the door to get in. Um, so when it comes to bioavailability, I mean, people can argue on both sides. Like they're just going to go back and forth, but it is shown like that the most bioavailable food to us humans is from meat sources, because I mean, if you look at I don't know if any of you are aware of the thing called diaz. It's a or it's called diaz, which stands for digestible indispensable amino acid score. And if you score like meat, dairy, poultry, um, things like that, they're all over 100, whereas plant-based is under 100. I mean, the highest one that they have is soy protein, but we're talking those plants are anti-nutrients because they contain oxalates, lectin, tannins, all these things that bind to nutrients and then can't stay in the body. So how beneficial is that? That's a question.
Yep. Um, so when you eat meat, it's of course, it varies from person to person. How good their digestion is, but meat is somewhere around 95% absorbed, and we all know that folklore about you eat meat and it rots in your colon, but very little of that meat ever makes it to your colon because it's absorbed in the small intestine. And for people who don't know, you put food in your mouth and you chew it and you swallow it, it goes down your esophagus. From the esophagus, it goes into the stomach. And the stomach, is basically an acid bath. And then from there, it goes into the small intestine. And almost all the meat, the proteins, the fats, and stuff are absorbed in the small intestine and go into the bloodstream from there. And some things like medium chain triglycerides and stuff like that get shunted right to the brain through a separate pathway, because the brain really loves those fuels. And then so very little. Now, of course, it depends on the person how effective their digestive system is. I mean, if you've been eating something other than a lot of meat for a long period of time, you're not necessarily going to efficiently digest it. Of course, you need bile from the gallbladder to, break down fats. And if you haven't been eating fats, particularly animal fats, for a long time, then a lot of people get gallbladder attacks because the bile sits in the bile duct in the gallbladder, and you wind up with gallstones and infections and stuff like that. And that was the basis for some major lawsuits against some of the weight loss groups that were very famous that you used to see on TV back in the day. And I know I got drugged to those with my mom. My mom was obese, and she would go to those, and it was all low fat diets they recommended. And most of the fats that they did have people out eat were plant fats, so and of course, we're going to make the argument that plant fats are less bioavailable and provide fats in the wrong ratios. Like vegetable oil tends to be high in omega 6, fatty acid in that high ratio of omega 6 tends to be very inflammatory and quite possibly one of the largest contributors of modern disease, all on its own, carbohydrates aside. So, what do you think about that? And there you go.
I agree. I agree. I think, I mean, to even add on to that, like people tend to ask me, even in the carnivore community, or even ask within the community, why am I low on B vitamins? Why am I low on certain things? Even though I've been on this strict carnivore diet, and I had to go, unfortunately, some people, especially us autistic people who have been born metabolically unhealthy. You have to understand that first. It's kind of almost like a diabetic, type 1 diabetic who is born. They're going to be metabolically unhealthy already. They're born that way. So are we autistic people. We have the unfortunate um, digestive problems we tend to have due to being born metabolically unhealthy. So to say that we don't need this any support, any or additional supplements or anything like that, I think in the beginning, more so than anything, we would need support. Um, Long term, it's still unknown, but if we can get um, a lot of times our off the high carbs food, which lower our acidity in our stomach, and add in slowly, like Tom, you said a while ago in one of our videos, that if you, instead of like just taking HCl or something, you can also just add meat in slowly, and then build start building back up your acid level, because your acidity level is going to lower or go up based on what you're eating. So that makes sense. Those of you who have acid reflux, who have, let's talk about poop for a second. If you are having poop that's coming out floating, or yellow, or something like that, then that's very likely or if you're pooping out hard poo, or you're constipated, it's very possible that you're having bile problems. Your gallbladder has not been stimulated enough through the SAD diet. Um, so it kind of is a little bit slow, and that bile, like you said, it just sits there, and it's not something that just, what a lot of people mistake, and even doctors tell people who are on a ketogenic diet, that the ketogenic diet is what caused the gallstones. You really got to change your doctor, because
Yeah.
gallstones take years and years to form, and all of a sudden you're on a ketogenic diet, and they're telling you your the stones are trying to come out. I mean, the stones have been formed. No, it's actually because your gallbladder is all of a sudden waking up. They're going to try to move all that sludge. They're going to try to move all that hardened material out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gallstones out. So that's the misconception. So for us, what's the outcome of that? They tell you to take out your gallbladder. That was one of the worst things you could possibly do. So you got to look at alternatives. This is where I come in as a functional nutritionist, that I'm not going to tell you take out your gallbladder. I mean, unless I told my doctor, who's luckily found a keto doctor, and he was like, well, do you want to take it out? I go, I'm not going to take out my gallbladder unless it's shriveled up and almost toxic to my body. To that point, then I'll think about it. But I would rather do natural remedies to help move those stones out, to break it apart. And a lot of the times, this is not medical advice, but informational advice. If you already have gallbladder stones, or gallstones, they've already formed, what do you do? So the options are, you can actually take TUDCA. I would look that up if any of you who are interested in that. TUDCA actually softens up the stones. It kind of like breaks it down. Then the bile, if you take bile with your meal or something, it'll up the bile, and so that it won't happen again. Your bile, the liver will be able to produce more bile,
Hmm.
and just having all that support, having bile, and I'm talking more for severe cases. Okay, um, taking TUDCA and bile are
Yeah,
probably
if
what's.
I'm not mistaken, I was talking about this with Sean one time, and he was saying that there is a medication you can get that helps break up gallstones. So
Mhm,
there's
mhm.
pharmaceutical support for that too. I don't know the name of it, but you could ask anybody could ask their doctor about it. You know.
Yeah, well, TUDCA is like, it's a supplement, and it's made from a lab, of course, but at least you have a more, what is it, less invasive thing
Hmm.
than, you want to just get your gallbladder back to health, because once you take out your gallbladder, you cannot get it back. There is a reason why you have a gallbladder. It's never like so simple as, oh, we'll just take it out, as doctors say. that you're going to mess up your bile production, because what gallbladders does, it's a pouch that holds bile in it,
Yeah.
and it's reused bile. It's not something that's it's concentrated in there. So like that's why the concentration of that, once it's pushed into the, or seeps into the small intestine where your food has been broken down into, that's where all the nutrients, the bile, takes the fat and then absorbs all those nutrients. So those who have problems with like fat absorption or fats, you're noticing, in your poop that it's not the way it should be. A lot of the times, it has to do with bile. Maybe it's you're not producing enough bile. Maybe your stomach, and then it could be because of your stomach acid is low. Maybe you just have sludge in there. It's just there's a lot of things that could be happening for that to happen. So, but yeah.
Yeah, a few lucky people, the once the gallbladder's removed, the bile duct actually can expand and be a little bit more of a reservoir for the bile. So, but I certainly wouldn't want my gallbladder taken out and count on that happening because it doesn't happen for everybody.
Yep. Yep. I mean, it still moves. Like you're gonna still, the pancreas can still, even if you go onto a ketogenic diet or whatever. Like it's actually preferable. It's still actually preferable because you still need the nutrients. You need the K2. What does K2
Mhm.
do? K2 takes calcium and puts it in the right places instead of glaucoma, or instead of osteoporosis, instead of arthritis, instead of all these other problems in the arteries. You know what I mean? Like that's the importance of the production of having bile. You cannot not have it. It's not. That's why we're carnivores. That's what we do.
Yeah, the liver makes the bile, and then there's supposed to be a certain amount stored in your gallbladder, so that
Hmm.
when you eat and you get that bolus of fat, then bile comes out and sort of breaks it down like a detergent. And that's how it's
Yeah.
supposed to work. And when you don't use it, it atrophies. Then you get sludgy gallstone like
Yep.
substances in there. Well, let
Yep.
me say hi to everybody real quick. So Dad Yuar was in here early, and
Hi.
um,
Hi, Raymond.
Shayar is here. Vanessa is here. Good to see you again, Vanessa. And of course, Raymond, Beef Master himself. Raymond Neff is here. So, um, let's back up just a little bit on the whole digestion thing because I was thinking about last week. I mentioned that I was reading up on bacteria and stuff like that, and how streptococcus and
Right.
candida live in the film in your mouth, right? So you can imagine too, when you start eating, there's enzymes and microbes in your saliva that start working on the food while you're chewing, right? It's in your saliva. And so if you've been eating a high carb diet, the microbiome in your mouth again is going to be sort of maladjusted for going on a carnivore diet, right? Where you shift back to meat. But of course, it'll change as you eat meat. Um, so then, when you're chewing your food, it gets coated with the sort of first round of um, microbes and chemicals that break down the food, right?
Hmm.
So then,
Hmm.
of course, and this same's probably true in the esophagus. And then, having highly acidic stomach content is a very expensive process. So if you're not eating food that requires that acid to break it down, it's entirely possible that your stomach acid will be weak. And of course, just making all that mucus that coats your stomach to protect it from the acid itself might be reduced.
Yeah.
So, that's another change that might be taking place. And then, of course, the microbiome of the small intestine itself, in addition to needing the bile, you got to have the right microbiome in the small intestine right below the stomach in order to start breaking down the meat. And all that, those environments change based on what you put in them.
Yep.
And I know a lot of people, they go straight for the, what do you call those, microbiotic supplements, and, my opinion is that, like, if you need that all the time, a lot of people argue like, oh, you got to eat fermented foods or you got to drink kombucha because you need to replenish your microbiome. And I'm thinking, if that's the case, if you need to count on supplements or kombucha or fermented foods, there's something wrong. It's probably your diet, but you know,
Yeah,
and they all
yeah.
might help in the beginning, right? You
Right,
know,
right, right.
but
Yeah.
because things like kombucha are full of sugar, anyways. You know, there's no two ways about it. You know, so
I mean, like if you look at it, they even said like the Hadza tribe, their microbiome. Like, how are we judging our microbiome? How are we judging what is actually healthy and what is not? I mean, of course, I mean, aside from we're looking at they're basically my understanding is that they're basing it off of the homeostasis or dysbiosis, right? Like if it's not doesn't have any homeostasis in the body, you can see us having health outcomes. But if you, I think that I believe that what I heard from when I was listening to Salad Dino,
Dr. Salad Dinosaur, yeah.
Salad Dinosaur, um, he had mentioned I think that their microbiome is like different than ours, like because they're mostly meat based, right? So
Yeah, but those guys love their honey too. So
well, that's true too. I mean, I can't. I believe that you can't find honey all the time, all day, every day. But like, once in a while that they do find it, they're gonna go
that's
check
like
on.
these guys' second job, though.
Right.
Meat and honey, that's their thing. So
Yeah, yeah. But then metabolically wise, they're constantly moving. They're searching, hunting constantly. So they can and they have not had processed food, so therefore they can consume these kinds of things. So we can't compare us to them. It's really we gotta look. That's apples to apples to oranges. You gotta look at oranges and oranges, apples and apples. We are looking at a country that has already been metabolically unhealthy with all these processed foods. We cannot compare ourselves to those in Okinawa. We cannot compare ourselves to those in. But
and then
if
you got
you
to say compare it to when, right? It's
exactly
not just who, it's
true,
when, right?
that's true, very
And then
true.
this is the thing, every part of the body has a different biome, right? Your
Hmm.
brain has one, your mouth has one, your big toe has one, your you know, your nostrils have another, right? And
Right.
most of that's dependent on input, right? What's in that environment. So
Yeah.
I that's one of the things that I think a lot of what we think about microbiome inside our bodies has to do with advertising, because these people sell the probiotics and it all starts with, well, there was a study that showed an association between acidophilus and such, and then it's like, so you need to take acidophilus supplements, or whatever it is, right? So they build a business based on a study that associated one of these strains of microbiome with something in a study, right? But when you look at it from the 1,000-foot level, and you look at all these studies and all these products, it makes no sense, and it's very clear. Nobody knows what the perfect microbiome is, and rarely do they even talk about where in the digestive tract they're talking about, because the biome in your mouth is different from your esophagus, which is different from your stomach, which is different from your small intestine, which is different from different parts of the large intestine and the colon. They're all very unique, right? And that was my question about eating coconut oil. Well, if it's so good at killing microbes, is it good to be putting it in your elementary canal? Because it's I don't know
Question.
how
I have
far
to
it goes, but what does it kill on the way down?
That's true. That's true. I got to look at that one because I've used coconut oil and I still use coconut
Sure.
oil for
Me
my
too.
teeth. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, like I use it legitimately. Like I had a cavity before, and then you saw it on the scans and everything. And I did oil pulling, which is basically you just hold the oil, coconut oil, in your mouth for a good like 20 minutes, and I did it every other day. And this is when I wasn't like strict keto or anything like that, all the way back then and um, years ago, and it was gone like in a couple months maybe. Like
mhm.
I went to a doctor, the doctor again, and he forgot. He of course he's not gonna remember every single patient, so he took a scan again. It wasn't there anymore. You could clearly see it on the last one. He was very surprised. So,
Well,
yeah.
my first sort of foray into low carb happened a long time ago. By chance, I got stuck in an airport. I got I got bumped on a flight, and I had nothing with me. And this is back before we had smartphones, I think, pretty close to that. And so all I there was a bookstore, and I saw a book called Protein Power, which probably everybody in the low carb community's heard of because it's been around. And I read that book because I had all this time to kill, and I thought about it, but I didn't really have any other context for it. So I did start eating higher protein and stopped eating carbohydrates. And two things happened. One, I went to the dentist, and he said, "Well, you had a cavity, but it remineralized." And then the other thing that would happen was used to wear reading glasses, and this is it probably 20 years ago, whenever that book came out. And I didn't need glasses. I went back to the optometrist, and he's like, "Oh, well, your prescription's changed. You actually don't need glasses anymore."
That's
So
awesome.
changing my diet had an impact on that. But there wasn't really anything in there in the book that I recalled that related to eyesight and teeth, or remineralizing a cavity. I have known several people that belong to groups. I think they were on their Facebook groups. They're probably still around, but they would practice healing their teeth. And I think butter, putting butter, regular cow butter on their teeth was part of the strategy. I never really got into it, but yeah, even teeth can be healed when you get a cavity sometimes.
Mm.
Anyways.
I
And
have
of
a
course,
problem with butter. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the cavities goes back to eating starches and sugars that fuel
Yep.
the
The
streptococcus.
bacteria.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say like that if I used butter instead of coconut oil, I think I would have rather swallowed the butter than the coconut oil. So like that would be a problem because apparently like if you swallow the coconut oil with the toxins, it just doesn't make sense. So you should spit the coconut oil out. So, but yeah, um, going back to like you know the homeostasis of your body of each area, like even the small intestines, like if it gets the wrong bacteria in there, that's basically how it we get diagnosed with like was it H pylori and like um I forgot what it was, but you SIBO, that's what it was, SIBO.
SIBO. Mhm.
Mhm. Is when it's in the wrong place. It's not
Well,
supposed to be in the wrong
and
place.
just for the sake of reference, H. pylori is the infection that we think of that causes ulcers typically, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Not supposed to be there.
Yeah, it's in the wrong place. And then SIBO is when the biome, typically that's in the lower intestine or the large intestine, starts moving up towards the small intestine, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
that's mostly
Those things
from
yeah,
eating excess carbohydrates.
because they can thrive. Oh gosh, sugar. You got to think of them as yeast in a sense because, like you said, it ferments in the body, right? So if it's fermenting in the body, what are they? Sugar and fermentation together. That's why they can ferment. That's why even cancer it ferments in the body. That I mean, it doesn't it make sense? That's
Yeah,
basically it's like a yeast almost.
let me say hi to Marge since she popped in. Fit Granny
Hi.
Marge. So, hello, Marge. Thanks for coming. It's good to see you
He
here.
came in as a different name today.
Yeah,
They
looks like
Granny
she
Mark.
changed it up. Fit Granny Marge. Yeah. She used to
Hey Mark.
be
Oh, sorry.
she used to be keto keto granny.
Oh yeah.
Fit keto Marge or something like that. I forget now.
Yeah. It says fit Granny March.
I looked it up. That protein power book from Dr. Eads came out in 96. So it was around that time and I'm pretty sure it had just come out because it was on a display, like it was a new book. So somewhere around there, 96, 97 was when I was first flirting with this whole thing, and didn't really stick with it. Didn't know anybody else who was doing it, right? And didn't
Yeah.
wasn't until much later that I even kind of tied it together with the um, Atkins diet, which I didn't know anything about the Atkins diet when it was first came out. It was kind of later on I learned about it. So, and then so back to what you were saying about fermentation, right?
Yep.
The lower intestine, the large intestine, that area is more associated with fermentation, right?
Hmm.
And then you mentioned cancer. So as the story goes, one of the reasons why people get cancer is because, or some cancers, is because the cells are constantly being fueled with sugar or glucose,
Hmm.
and they wind up fermenting that sugar when the mitochondria is damaged, presumably from excess oxidative stress or, free, let's see, what is it called? What are they called? Reactive oxygen species, right? Because they eventually damage the DNA in the cell, right? And then the cell has to revert to anaerobic fermentation of sugar. And that also triggers, which is an old how cells worked, millions of years ago, billion years ago, whatever it was. That was the common function of the cell. That's how they commonly made energy from ATP instead of through respiration, which is the way that we normally do it. And once it triggers that fermentation process, it also sort of turns off apoptosis, right? So it becomes an immortal cell. And
Yep.
that's one of the reasons why cancer cells, they don't normally die on their own. They just keep living on and taking over, and they're outside of the normal controls of the body.
And typically, to add on to that, typically what is so special about cancer cells is that typically your immune system is supposed to recognize, like, not only just pathogens but also like things that are damaged in your body. It's supposed to be able to recognize them and get rid of them. But because the cancer cells are using normal cells and have gotten damaged, and or they've changed into cancer cells, it's like the body cannot recognize it because it's a part of our body. So it's confused. But when you can make the environment not livable for them, which basically means you got to cut out the sugars. Our bodies can make sugar. So for the time being, while you're losing weight, blah blah blah, because you have all this stored glycogen in your body, it can still live off of that for a while. So the it's kind of like, I guess there's no common sense. I guess like people don't realize, or even in fact they even know that sugar, you know, cancer can live off of sugar. Like they still don't do anything about it. But I mean, typically I think at some points, or even certain cancers can live off of not only glucose but also glutamine. um and pretty much glutamine's in your body, produces it, you
Well,
get it in a lot of different food.
cancer cells don't ferment glutamine without the presence of glucose, which is an interesting thing. Even though glutamine can be fermented, it doesn't happen in the absence of sugar.
Right. There's still, but the body still can make it, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
the,
Yeah,
the
your
cat.
body can make all the glucose it needs for sure.
Mhm,
Because it
mhm,
can make it from the glycerol backbone as well, if I recall.
mhm.
So, but cancer doesn't ferment it unless glutamine, unless there's already other sugar present for some reason.
Right,
I
but it
think it
does
was
definitely hinder if you cut the sugars. It's gonna hinder that process.
I think it was Otto Warburg who first figured out the association between fermentation and cancer. It's like all the way back in, God, uh, I know. Well, I'm not sure exactly when he discovered it, but he got the Nobel Prize for it. Um, I'm looking for the dates. So he was alive from 1883 to 1970. So he had a good run. But let's see when he got the Nobel Prize. It doesn't say what date it was. So this is one of the things. It's not new news, right?
Right, right.
And
It's
it's
just
not like it was obscure. I mean, the guy got the Nobel Prize for it, so it was pretty
what
well known.
happened, right? Like, what happened? How did we get so far from this? Like, I guess there's just no money in meat.
It's funny. He died when I was born, right before I was born.
Oh.
Let's see. Yeah, I thought it'd be interesting just to establish when he got the Nobel Prize for it, because you would think at that point it'd be widely understood that one of the things that drives cancer is sugar.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think when I mention this to people, they look at me like, where did you dig up this obscure fact? It's like, I don't know. It's been written about almost every. It seemed like almost every low carb book I read mentions it.
Mhm, mhm. It's pretty standard, I think, the understanding of those who go on that journey. But if we're talking about it mechanistically, that some people need to understand a little bit more, because I even people in the keto community don't understand that gallstones are not created from being on the ketogenic diet. So I had to kind of educate them about that in one of the communities I was in.
Right. So let's shift gears then back to bioavailability. So
Yeah.
we've talked about how efficiently meat is absorbed. And so basically, the nutrients that are in meat are rarely absorbed. There's not much waste that passes on through you. But when you eat plants, you mentioned some of the chemistry behind it. I know one of the ones that always comes to mind for me is phytic acid. So phytic acid is ubiquitous in plants, but when you digest things containing phytic acid, the phytic acid binds with other nutrients. And once the
Mhm.
phytic acid binds with it, it just passes through your digestive tract.
Mhm.
So it's
Mhm.
essentially robbing you of nutrients because they're chemically locked in a way that you cannot absorb them. So, and the same is true of fiber. This is one of the things that gets me about, you see commercials or print ads for, vegetables or fruits that got vitamin C or they have iron or whatever. Well, if they also have fiber, a lot of that nutrient they're talking about is locked up in the fiber and it's indigestible. So it just goes
Right.
right through you. And some of
Yep.
the other nutrients, let's say you're eating steak and salad, some of the nutrients in the steak is actually going to get locked up with the
Yep.
fiber and the phytic acid in the salad itself. So,
That's really funny you mentioned that, because like my doctor had asked me, he goes, I thought I was having enough protein or something, but I'm noticing that I'm not growing as I should be. And when he went to a keto doctor, or one of a keto doctor, they told him he needs more protein. So he needs to eat more meat. And he was like, I eat enough, but he tells me he eats 7 cups of vegetables. And I
mm,
was like, then you need to, one, eat less vegetables if anything, and add in more protein. But also the reason, even if you did that, if you're eating your vegetables with the meat, yeah, it's you're gonna not have high amounts of, especially like iron. He was wondering why a lot of his patients are low on iron, and even him who are on like who are seemingly eating healthily. And I said, well, it's because that's the one major things that these anti-nutrient vegetables do, is that they they bind to iron specifically. A lot of it's iron. I think I forgot what the other nutrients were, but like you're gonna be low on them, even though you're like, I'm eating them. Why?
they're
Because they're
passing
binding.
through.
Yep, just
Just
passing
passing through.
through.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned it last time, but they were studying. I was reading these studies that were done to see what if green tea extracts and stuff like that helped with weight loss. And if I'm not mistaken, what I was reading were rodent studies. So not necessarily identical to human, but basically the chemicals in the green tea were binding with nutrients, so they were just passing through people. So they did work. They could help you lose weight because you're not getting it. your macronutrients are being bound up along with your micronutrients, and you're just creating a caloric deficit by taking a substance that doesn't allow you to absorb the food you're eating. Which is a good argument. Some people say you shouldn't drink coffee or tea with your meals because the
Yeah.
plant chemicals, the phytic acid, the tannins, and everything bind with the food and block the absorption of nutrients. Now, I suppose if you're just trying to lose weight, you're not worried about some micronutrient deficiency.
Yeah.
You know, it might be a strategy, right? But
It would be, but that's kind of like a double-edged sword because you need those micronutrients, like to at
mhm.
least have your body work properly with those micro. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't. eh, Common sense wise, and this is from a person who's like drinks coffee, decaf coffee. Not I've stopped for the last week, but like I'm not opposed to coffee, but maybe
I'm
because
not either.
yeah, I
I
mean,
just I think if you have the strategy, I mean, number one, I drank a lot of coffee before, and then it's just tapered off on its own, but it didn't seem to make much of a difference, in my progress. I still
mhm,
I've been eating carnivore since the end of 2017. I'm always baffled by people who remember the day, like Brett Lloyd was just celebrating his fifth year anniversary, and I'm like, did you write this down on a calendar somewhere? I mean, so anyways, somewhere at the end of 2017, I tried carnivore, and then um, or was it 2016? I don't even remember. So I've been doing this for a number of years now because it's already summer 2023 now. In fact, it's July 16th. So when you're completely changing your diet, you're giving up a lot of things, right? And it
mhm.
seemed like to me the most significant things were sugar, starches, and vegetable oils, and I didn't really have much interest in eating anything plant based, you know. So I was like, well, and a lot of other people they're like, well, I'm still drinking coffee or whatever. And then I noticed it just tapered off. Like I had a cup of coffee today, as it's Sunday, and I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, that'd be nice. I'll have a cup of coffee. But I don't really notice any difference, and I didn't have it with a meal,
I was
right?
gonna ask you that. Did you have it
Yeah.
with a meal or not? Typically, because if you
No.
didn't, that maybe is why. Maybe if we stand alone, um, drink coffee, it might be okay for some people, but some people it doesn't matter. They may need to
Yeah,
do.
and we
Yeah.
we all tolerate a certain amount of sugar and vegetable oil and
Mhm.
whatever carbohydrates or toxic plants. We all tolerate a certain amount, and whatever that is for an individual, it's hard to say. And I don't think anybody really has the goal of depriving their life of whatever of everything they enjoyed that they know isn't 100% good for them, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So I mean, you just take it to the extreme. I've talked to people all the time. They compare themselves to pro athletes and stuff, and I, I'll, I'm just going to throw this out there. This will get me super canceled, but I happen to notice that women tend to be particularly cruel to other women. So, you see people and, they pick apart what they look like. There was a character on, I think we saw her mostly on Instagram that Justin and I used to talk about all the time. And she would just look at photographs of all kinds of people, including several people that I know, and just pick apart what they looked like. And, one of them was a marathon runner. And I'm like, well, when you've been running marathons for 20 years, you're going to look like that. You're not going to necessarily look like whatever your picture of perfect health was. And the same thing was with some of the weightlifters. It's like, yeah, but that person's a power lifter. They don't look like a bodybuilder. Everybody thinks a bodybuilder is this ideal human being, but almost all the famous ones we know don't have natural physiques at
Mhm.
all, right?
Mhm.
They've used
Mhm.
all sorts of performance enhancing drugs.
Mhm.
And, you could take Lance Armstrong. Look at that guy. He has no fat in his face, right? He's
Yep.
completely re-engineered for riding a bicycle, and none of it's particularly healthy. Being an endurance athlete, not healthy. Being a bodybuilder that has some essentially alien body that everybody's come to glorify, not healthy. you know
I mean, didn't Sean Baker say that actually there is no such thing as a vegan athlete, or was it something like that? I think he said something like that, and it was really interesting perspective what he had said, because all of them now have gotten sick or something, and
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be sustainable on a vegan diet. I mean, or was it his name Babumian? I forgot his first name. Anyways, he did fairly well. He wasn't exactly a world class athlete, but he was in that movie, one of those vegan movies, one of those plant based movies. I can't remember.
well,
That's
I mean, I heard that even then they're still intaking like eggs or something. They're still
well, they
intaking
took a
something.
lot of supplements, so they're substituting what we get out of meat with chemicals, right? And
Mhm.
that guy was taking massive amounts of powder proteins that were made from a huge variety of plants, right? So he's taking pea protein and other stuff that's specifically blended in order to make him huge, and it's not sustainable as far as I know. I don't know any of the plant-based power lifters or bodybuilders that continued for very long. So even with the
Mhm.
supplementation, and we've gone over many of the things that just aren't available in the plant world. One of the ones that's really hard to get is leucine, which is an amino acid, and leucine actually triggers muscle growth. So if you're in one of those sports where you want muscle growth, you're going
Mhm.
to have a hard time getting that in the plant world. And
Mhm.
that's one of the one of the arguments they've always made was you got to have carbohydrates to raise your insulin levels in order to get in an anabolic state to build muscle.
Muscle.
But we
Mhm.
know now that leucine is at least as good at signaling muscle growth as insulin is. So you don't necessarily need high levels of insulin to build muscle. And of course all the other things that are missing, the taurine, carnitine,
Yep. Yep.
uh,
Creatine.
creatine. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I
I
mean, there
mean,
are all kinds of artificial sources for creatine now, but yeah.
I mean, like, I mean, going back to even just ethically, they say that you know the reason why they do it is so that because animals, it's poor animals or whatever, But like I was telling you before we started this live about this article that I found about plants actually scream, and not
Hmm.
scream in a sense, yeah, not scream in a sense that you know that like how animals would or we would, but they audibly um, vocalize when they're stressed. So, like in this article that I found, you can all look it up. Tel Aviv in Israel, University in Israel had conducted the study using an ultrasonic machine to be able to hear. I don't want to say machine device to hear sounds, and apparently when like they're dehydrated, or which was one of the worst pains for them, they scream. They're like they actually like will auto in that in the thing that they use will make sounds like every very often, and when their limb is cut off or something. So tomatoes. So the picture in that tomatoes, uh, they were doing the study on tomatoes and tobacco and a few other plants, but these ones reacted like if you cut off these plants, they scream.
Yeah, so the article's on smithsonianmag.com, and it's called Plants May Let Out Ultrasonic Squeals When Stressed. Human ears can't hear them, but other plants or animals might. And it's by Catherine J. Wu, December 9th, 2019. So again, it's on Smithsonian. Plants might let out ultrasonic squeals.
Like, I mean, that brings a question ethically. Are they comparing ethics with pain? Because they're experiencing pain. They're experiencing um, their own stressors, but we just can't hear them. So does that make it ethical? Like, I mean, It just seems ridiculous to me that we have a right more than plants.
Yeah, and that,
So,
you know, we were kind of talking about that. It's like, I don't know, if a plant screams, how intelligent could it be? Oh, and thanks Raymond F. He said that movie I was talking about was Game Changers.
game
That was one
changers.
of the plant-based, trying to pimp the plant-based athlete movement. And of course, by the time they got done filming that and released it, a number of those athletes were no longer plant-based. So, yeah, thanks
Wow.
Raymond.
I'm gonna have to look that one up. That's interesting. But yeah, like Sean Baker said, he's like, there's always a caveat to these so-called athletes. Either they've, like you said, are no longer high athlete performers,
Well,
or
did you ever see that? Let's stop sharing this here real quick. Did you ever see that video Arnold Schwarzenegger did to support plant-based foods for, I don't know, it was one of the big movie producers was heavily invested in one of the plant-based meat substitutes a while back, and he asked Arnold to do a video, right? And so Arnold is making a protein shake or something in his kitchen, and he's like, "Oh, you don't need to eat the meat. You can eat the plants, and it can do good." You know, and he's putting all this stuff in a blender, and then he throws in whole eggs with the shell in it, and he's talking about being plant based, and then he pours schnapps in it. And so I'm just like, how ironic that this guy is supposed to be supporting the plant based movement and pouring whole eggs, not even cracking them, just dropping the whole thing in the blender, and then he's pouring booze in on top of it. I'm
is this
thinking,
supposed to be a joke? Because that
yeah,
sounds like
I think it was more of a joke to Arnie than it was any earnest support, you know. But well, I remember was watching, passing that video around to people, going, "What the hell are we watching here?" You know?
that sounds like a joke to me. Not
Yeah.
serious.
So this was one of the other articles we were tossing around. These are all in Autistic Carnivores for sure. We should probably make sure they're also in the Meat Mosaic Facebook group.
Oh, the
So
BAP.
people are new to it out there. I have a Facebook group called Autistic Carnivores. Jules is in there with me, and then we also have one called Meat Mosaic, and we have a Telegram group called Meat Mosaic. So if you like Telegram, they're the Telegram group's pretty small. I think it's maybe a dozen people, but we just keep in touch in there and send each other articles and share. I know Sly just did a Tough Mudder, so she was posting pics in there, which was cool. So here's this other article we were sharing, and there was right away there was something that caught my eye about this.
Hey guys, anytime you want to throw in some questions or comments, love to hear from you guys.
So this one is, it's not scaling very well. Anyways, I think people can see it.
Yeah.
It says, ask a doctor, is animal protein easier to absorb than plant protein? Animal proteins tend to be easier to absorb and digest than plant proteins, but studies show plants offer more health benefits. And if you notice, it says advised by Walter Willett. Now, Walter Willett's the plant-based guy at Harvard, right? And I don't know if a lot of people know this because I've been in discussions with people, and everybody thinks like Harvard is the same thing comes up with NASA. This is like it's one institution, but Harvard is actually made up of several colleges. And there's Walter Willett has been a prolific producer of like the survey-based nutritional studies and stuff like that, where they get people to supposedly write down what they've eaten for 20 years, and then they make predictions, based on their current health state, right? So these epidemiological nutritional studies, which definitely aren't even science. So right off the bat, I'm looking at this Walter Willett. It's going to be a garbage paper. So he's one of those people like Dr. Kahn who just dared dyed in the wool. It doesn't matter how many studies they show. um, they're gonna find some way to argue on the basis of plants.
Of course,
You
of
know,
course.
they've just always been committed to it, and they're not gonna change. And these are also the guys like Dr. Khan. It's like this dude broke his foot stepping out of an elevator or something. Like, and it took months and months for it to heal. And it's like, well, yeah, dude, you've been eating plants for decades. You got brittle bones. These guys, back to the collagen thing. It's like you eat a bunch of fructose. The fructose cross links with the collagen, and the body can't repair the collagen. And so, collagen is the structure of almost everything in the body. So, if it
Mhm.
can't be repaired, of course, you're going to be fragile.
Who was this? Do you know? There's this like a hardcore vegan who was like a bicyclist or a runner or something like that, and he was touting how great this diet is, but he's like not bedridden, but like he is not able to uh, do much. He's like a famous athlete of some kind, running maybe or bicyclist, and it's really just ridiculous how he touts this. Yet he cannot. He has such back pain that he is unable to even do any of that. And yet he's touting this diet, which is like how does that make sense? You're so sick. And that to me, back problems can come from like certain deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies. Like it could be vitamin D, could be, you know, I mean, I'm my guess is it's because of collagen. He doesn't have proper amount of collagen. Because if it's back pain, it could be like the discs are worn down to the point where like there's not enough cushion between things like that. Just
Yeah, that on Got Real Milk, they go into the athletes that were in Game Changers, and so they list the Game Changers came out in 2018, which man, I didn't even realize it was that long ago. And here's the list of the athletes who went vegan and how their journey ended. So Tim Chef quit veganism, Andrew Luck injured, quit football. CC Sabathia injured and quit. Novak, Zakor, Jovic injured. Lori Markkanen, uh,
mhm.
early season ended. Kylie Irving, knee surgery 2018, hip surgery 2019.
My gosh.
Morgan Mitchell got slower, finished 23rd out of 24 in World Athletic Championship. Tom Brady decided to eat meat. DeMarcus Cousins injured. Derek Morgan injured, retired at 30. Nate Diaz, not a vegan. Yeah, Nate Diaz is one of those guys that was plant based for a while. He's a fighter, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's an MMA fighter. And he tried to, I think he has a brother too. I think they both tried to go plant based and then wound up having to go back to meat. And it was kind of one of those things in interviews. It's like, well, I still mostly eat plant based, but I had to add in. And then gradually they were just doing better on meat.
Speaking of the ASD community, actually, sorry, totally different subject, but we're
Mhm.
talking about famous people. Temple Grandin tried being a vegetarian and was like, I no, I can't do it. Like because she loves animals, so it was like she was like, okay, if humans could, it would be great if we could go that route, but we cannot. She's like she fully admits that like
Not to toot my own horn, but did you know I did an interview with her?
you did
Mhm.
when
About 3 years ago.
what is
Yeah,
it on the channel?
yeah.
I cannot see
I'll
it.
I'll
Link
post the
it,
link.
please.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was I couldn't believe she wanted to do the interview with me. So yeah, I
good for
talked to her and
you.
I told her that I come from a group of people. It's essentially about autistic carnivores, and I said it's a group of autistic people that just eat meat. And she's like, well, I don't know. She said something to the effect of, she's like, I don't know about just eating meat, but especially growing children, they need to have a healthy dose of animal protein at each meal and stuff like that.
Did you
Yeah.
tell
So, huh?
did you tell her that like actually the studies show that if you eat like plants and stuff like that, I'm like trying to do the tomboys, but it's not, I'm not even close. But yeah, did you tell her? Did you inform her of things about?
You know, what's interesting is before the interview, I contacted her, people, whatever,
Yeah.
contact person, and the contact person was like, "Oh, she's gonna want to do this." I was like, "Really?" She's like, "Oh yeah." She's like, "I'm gonna send her your number," and she calls me. I have her number. I still have her number, her cell phone number, right? So
I would love to pick apart her brain. Oh my god.
so I called her and just, or we talked and, set up a time. But the thing is, the only resource she uses is a um, iPhone, and she only knows how to use FaceTime. So I had to borrow a Mac with FaceTime and video recording set up on it from
Oh,
a
I'm
friend.
totally watching it.
I don't have any Apple products, but I got nothing against them. I just don't have any. But that's all. That's the only thing she had to use is FaceTime, and there was no way to go from FaceTime to Windows or FaceTime to Android or anything like that. So I did all that, and then when in the time between when we booked it and when it happened, she just called me out of the blue one evening. She's like, "Oh yeah, I just got in from a conference. Getting in my car at the airport and driving home. Thought I'd call you and chat it up while I'm driving." And it was just, you're just on the phone with Temple Grant and getting to know Temple Grant and just talking about, everyday stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know her real well, but I got to talk to her on the phone a few times and then sit down and record a video with her. And, it's
Yeah.
probably, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for me to kind of say any other interview I did was was more exciting or more um, powerful for me, anyways. I mean, so
Really quick, Shah Yar says was vegan for 23 years. Have switched to carnivore 8 months ago. Shah, how's it been for you?
yeah, let us know how it's been for you. I mean, we find that most, a lot of times when people are plant based and they switch to carnivore, they do quite well because they're disciplined eaters and they notice the difference right away that they were just lacking some nutrients in their old diet. So they tend to feel better and be enthusiastic about it. So glad
Yeah.
you're here.
Congratulations to you, Shah. Like that's amazing. You were 23 years vegan. I'm also curious, like what made you go, this is you're from one spectrum to the other. So I'm really curious of like what made you do that.
Yeah, and considering most people go plant based, quit in the first 5 years, citing catastrophic health effects. It's amazing. I'm always curious how somebody makes it 20 years, 23 years, 30 years, which some people do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll say
Really
hello to Remla.
Ramikla,
Is that Rami Ramikla?
Ramikla. Bugs? What is that?
Zabugs. I think they got it. She's suggesting they had to eat bugs as when they were plant based to survive. So,
Oh, speaking of bugs, I will not eat bugs or poop. Those two things I will not try. Oh man. Um awesome. Anybody have a comment question cuz I'm liking that. Some people telling us that their experiences already vegan. I just cannot believe that's amazing. 23 years. That's a very long time.
that's
I don't
commitment.
know how I've done that.
Yeah, and I I try and encourage people to read or listen to as many books as they can, and I don't discourage people from listening to the ones written by the plant-based people and the vegans because I think it's important to get all the information, and I think that if you do consume the literature from both sides, I think you're still going to come out on the side of eating meat. If anything, I think it drives home the point that we're essentially have evolved to eat meat, and we evolved the way we do because we ate almost exclusively meat.
Yep. Yep.
So, and if for
Uh,
anybody hasn't read it, the one by Lear Keith, it's the Vegan Myth, I think. Very
mm,
good, very
I've
compelling
heard of that.
book. She does come across in a lot of the interviews as a rather angry person, perhaps, but nonetheless, she delivers a great message, and her suffering alone is a tremendous message in itself, right? It's just being plant based really destroyed her health, and she
Oh, yeah.
suffered from it. She still suffers, because she developed serious back problems and stuff like that. So she's
Ramikla
kind of
says,
disabled.
oh, sorry. Ramikla says, no, it's a future dystopia reference. Oh, okay. Is it
The future dystopia of having to eat bugs.
Oh, here you go. Shaw says, getting healthy. I used to weigh 305 pounds, did Atkins diet weight. I came down to 160 pounds, got sick. Doctor told me to stop eating meat, switched to vegan. Worst thing I ever did.
I could totally see how that would happen, right?
I think we kind of been there. Maybe I haven't done the whole vegan thing, but I have gotten to the part where doctor was telling me, oh, what kind of sick, by the way? When you say you got sick, is
Well,
there a certain kind of sick?
that thing is, there's that fear of eating meat, and then you do it, and even though you a lot of progress, as soon as there's a problem, that fear kicks back in. I've seen it
Right.
before. It's like, oh my god, even though I lost, what did Shaw lose, like 145 pounds or something? You lose
Uh,
145 pounds, and then you get
yeah.
sick, and then you immediately recoil, going, oh my god, the meat was a mistake.
Yeah. So that makes me curious. What kind of sick? Like what? I mean, was it cancer? Was it something else? Because, I mean, that'd be funny that the doctor would, if it was, let's just say cancer for whatever reason, was like, oh yeah, yeah, keto diet caused or Atkins diet caused it. Like cancer was probably already there.
Well,
I,
and you mentioned the gallstones. Same thing is true of kidney stones. Kidney
yep.
stones, they take a long time to form. And what happens when you stop eating oxalates? Your body starts getting rid of them, so your kidney stones start breaking up, and then people go, "Oh my god, I got kidney stones from eating meat." And there, you really, your body's just getting rid of something that accumulated. Same thing with heart attacks. People, you don't occlude an artery overnight or in a year. It takes decades, and you've got to. It's a whole process of having high blood sugar and the glucose sort of dissolving the glycocalyx and causing a inflammation on the high pressure side of the heart, usually the left descending artery, right? And then your body starts plaquing it over, and then eventually it calcifies it, and it's a process of many years, perhaps decades. And then, but if somebody switches diets, and then all of a sudden they have a heart attack or something, oh, it must be the meat. It was the meat all along.
I mean, it could also like as it was healing, something could have broken off. You know what I mean? Like it's because it's like a scab. So like if it breaks off, and then you have other parts of your heart that is already like pretty much clogged up, and that comes in, it hits those, and it completely stops the flow of blood. Yes, of course you're gonna. I mean, but it wasn't caused because of the diet. It was, you know what I mean? Which is it's just insane to me. Oh, Shaw says, okay. Ramikla says, don't you love when? Oh, before that, Klaus Schwab, you will eat no meat, will own nothing, and be happy. And don't you love when someone with a German accent says how they will rule the world? And then Shaw, nothing that serious, gut issues and digestive problems. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, you're going to have sometimes digestive problems. I mean, I'm not sure if you had like, I'm not sure how long you've been on the Atkins diet, but if he promoted eating broccoli, things like that. So you're eating like still plants that are that cause gut issues, which is funny, but it wasn't from the meat. And if you do have problems with the meats, usually typically from the beginning, that happens typically. So that's really interesting. Correlation does not equal causation sometimes. So
Right.
very interesting. Oh, sorry guys, I gotta get going. My
Yeah, I
kids
should
are,
probably get going too, but it was good seeing you, Jules. I enjoyed the conversation. And thanks to
yeah.
all the people who left us comments.
Love you guys. Thank you so much. I love hearing from you guys, and come on the show, tell us about what you guys are going through, questions, comments, anything. We really, really appreciate that. That's what makes this show really more interesting for everybody.
Yep. So until next time, eat some meat, feel better, and whatever
Yes.
you do, don't fall down that carbo.
Purple.
Carbo.
Bye.